I'm David Noble. Welcome back to the 9 o'clock meeting. Today we're revisiting old stuff. As at the start of the year, pre-season, me and Ash from the outside line had given our thoughts over to how we thought things would go this year, where people would finish, and the reasons why they would do that. And now, season's over, we thought we'd revisit that and see what we said about certain things. How wrong were we? Quite wrong, as it turns out. But in the meantime, welcome, Ash. Thank you. Come back to the show.
Thanks for having me. I've been equally looking forward to and dreading this as the season has unfolded and as our predictions have diverged. I've been like, I'm looking forward to doing this, but also increasingly not.
Well, I was thinking from the moment I saw testing that we might not be quite where we thought we were with it. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, no, and there was a rule change that I think we were probably vaguely aware of.
But I don't think we knew quite how much of an effect on certain teams it might have.
Yeah, and that's played a big factor.
Definitely.
That and me wanting to be a fanboy of a certain team as well has played a big factor. So yeah, it's not gone great.
Even if you couldn't afford their merch.
Yeah, well, still can't. But
I don't know.
But yeah,
Right. Well, we'll get sort of starting to talk about it now. On our original lists, we hadn't talked about who was going to finish in 20th, but I think the person who finished in 20th is kind of deserving of a mention this time, seeing as how it was Robert Kubica.
That was lovely about that is we guessed the same person for 20th, and somehow, even though we were right, we're still wrong. We've got that wrong, so that was a great start.
While we're talking about the lower end of the grid, though, I think it also deserves a shout out to the person who, in my mind, has probably been the hardest working person this season, and that's the Haas social media person, who,
oh god, yeah,
for somehow trying, their attempts have been brave.
It's they've had to put a brave face on it and be like, look, this guy's our driver. We need to treat him like any other guy's our driver, and we've just got to be excited about it, whether we are or not.
Yeah.
And yeah, I imagine there has been the mute button has been used quite heavily, or the hide replies function.
I would imagine so, yes. I mean, the thing is, sort of, what do you do if you're in that position? I mean, the thing is, what doesn't help their cause, of course, this season is just how absolutely terrible the car's been. I mean, we said we didn't think it was going to be quite as bad as like 2018, 2019 Williams, and it was that bad, if not worse. It's yeah, they've had the horror show they've had this year.
Yeah, it's even. I mean, signs were not promising, but even I'm actually quite surprised by how bad it's gone.
Yeah.
But even if you remove the factor of the car and just look at same machinery, the gap internally as well is also
that was ridiculous.
Quite telling. Mick Schumacher still being a second faster on around Jeddah without opening DRS is like
ridiculous. Was it one of the circuits? It's like, I know he hadn't had a lot of practice or whatever else, but Mick Schumacher was like, was it 2.3 seconds quicker or something stupid like that? And number 9's race engineer turned around and went, "Good lap."
I mean, again, similar to the social media guy, you've got to kind of again, he's in that position where it's like, look, this is my driver, I've got to praise him, and like there was literally praise given out because at Azerbaijan he couldn't press the buttons, and then the race later he was praised because he could now press the buttons.
I mean, I know there's been like the thing about he's got a slightly heavier chassis, but that doesn't make a second elapsed difference. And it always made me joke. He was sort of saying, like, because Mick's a member of the Ferrari Academy and he's got access to all this lot. And it's like, your dad is literally worth more than possibly Formula One. He's bought a team, so he makes Lance Stroll's dad look like a pauper, and it's like trying to play the such a poor boy act. It really is just like, what are you playing at, dude? But yeah,
No, yeah,
there is no
it's
sympathy. I've just dropped my
no,
pen and pad, so now I've got to pick them up. Hang on a sec.
it's all right.
Thinking there might not be the best place to leave it, but it's sort of like I'm going to be waving paper around now. Anyway, back to where we were. So, having talked about that, shall we discuss what our take it in turns again, going through like 19, 18, 17, 16, going down to 15, and then talking about them?
Yep, sounds like a plan.
Because we did so well on these. Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go on.
Right. 19th, I had Nicholas Latifi.
I also had Nicholas Latifi.
Yeah. In 18th, I had George Russell.
I had Mick Schumacher in 18th.
I think it's a point for you, isn't it? Because we were saying 1 point if we get one out, and 3 points if we get them spot on.
Okay. Yeah. So I've got a point. That's actually okay. Cool. I'll take that and run.
Encouraging. Right. In 17th, I've got Mick Schumacher, so just narrowly missed out on a point there.
I've got Giovinazzi in 17th.
Ooh.
So is that a point? I think 'cause he was 18th.
I think. Yeah. No, he was 18th. Yeah. Good job.
I think it's damning with faint praise, but again, I will take it.
Right. 16th now, isn't it? I've got Kimi Räikkönen.
Yes. And I've got George Russell. And you've nailed it. With Räikkönen. So that's, you've got, is that 3 points?
That is, I will gladly accept that and realise that on my list of drivers, I should have numbered them. Because I've got them written down in championship order, but I didn't put down numbers next to them. And, having Robert Kubica in there has really thrown me, because I kept counting up from the bottom, thinking, but that's not 20th.
I need to move off from 21. Let's just scroll up a touch. Yeah.
All good fun, right? So we were saying 15th, I've got Antonio Giovinazzi, which is not worthy of any points whatsoever.
And then I've got Räikkönen, so I've managed to pick up another almost point with that one. So yeah, not too bad. So 3-3 after the first section. I mean,
3-3 after the first round. Yeah, out of a potential.
In fact, there's points on the board.
Out of a potential 15.
Oh, don't do the. Don't do the potential. That doesn't make it good.
But let's not discuss that. So basically, the big outlier there is we knew Haas would be bad. We didn't realise they'd be that bad. Williams. Perhaps we should have seen that the extra investment might have made a bit of difference.
Yeah, well, we had feelings that they had at the very least caught up with those other two backmarker teams. It was a slightly unfair phrase, but that's kind of what they are at the moment. But the fact that in some races they were able to, go well above and beyond, comfortably getting out of Q2, and then Russell getting into Q3 quite a few times.
Yeah.
Then just the magic of, conditions and Spa being Spa. He managed to put it second as well.
There was just this weird mid-season run where they went about 4 races scoring consistent points. And it's just like, what happened at the start of the season and at the end of the season? How did that happen? Because it's like it went, nothing, point scoring run, nothing. And I don't know, it's like George Russell got his contract thing and then just sort of decided to go on holiday early.
Yeah, it's honestly, I can't put any sense to kind of what it was. Whether maybe it was at the point, because like we say, this season was a weird one with development tokens and when they switched focus, and maybe it was a case of, Williams did a bit of development before other people. They managed to get for those 4 races, they'd made some changes, brought some upgrades where maybe like, okay, they're slightly quicker. Then it's like, right, good, we're in a good place. Let's switch to next season, and then obviously other people maybe just surpass them, and that's when they kind of drop back off again. I don't know. And then as for George, like that was such a protracted saga as well. The fact that it, a really badly kept secret that everyone knew, but they didn't know, but they all knew.
We sort of knew it was coming. So the problem was, it was like, George is highly rated. If Mercedes hadn't picked him up then, how many more years is he going to want to be spending where he had been? I mean, the joke, of course, is what about if Williams get it right under the new regs? And Mercedes, because they were busy with the championship, weren't paying attention.
Well, this is the thing now, especially when, you've had the top two so locked in a battle all the way through.
Yeah.
You've got to think that gap is shutting, surely. The others, like, you look at the drop-off that McLaren have had in the latter part of the season.
Yeah.
And you think, well, that wasn't great, but then, come to start of next season, are we going to be like, okay, that's what you were doing?
Okay.
That's what you were thinking about.
I mean, the Williams we thought done slightly better. The Hasses we weren't expecting a lot, but they were terrible. Alfa Romeo, there's a world of things going on at Alfa Romeo. They were talking about new buyers and stuff. Obviously, the deal thing with Ferrari regarding the drivers seems to have changed completely and almost not be in play anymore. And it's like, they're not going to be Alfa Romeo for very much longer, because I can't imagine that Fiat, for example, would necessarily want one of their premium car brands running around in Nowheresville. It's like when they came back to the sport, there was like optimism that, Sauber as they were going to get on a rise and move further up the grid. But, I think we had the conversation before. I certainly had it with someone, possibly Ollie, TGS F1, basically sort of saying that if you're a premium car brand and the whole win on Sunday, buy on a Monday thing is in place, which is why a lot of companies go racing, let's be honest, you're not going to want to be running around in eighth while the people who are your main competitors in terms of like the market are winning the championship. If people just judge car buying according to Formula One, are you going to buy an Alfa Romeo? Are you going to buy a Mercedes? And it's been 3 seasons now, so they can't go on indefinitely just trundling around making up the numbers, surely. I've been expecting more. I've been expecting a step up, and it's just not developed that way.
No, and again, it's the big question of, have they written off large parts of the season, so that step up is next season? And obviously you've got a very good driver there in Valtteri Bottas, who did brilliant things in the Williams before he went to Mercedes. Sure, he's not been able to match Lewis Hamilton, but what a comparison that is to have to try and do. And he never qualified outside of Q3. He was consistent. He's made sure that they've won the Constructors' Championship every year that he's been there. Yeah. So, okay, he wasn't like Nico Rosberg levels in terms of taking it to Hamilton, but he's a great driver and he did his job.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, going to Alpha, and didn't he win a junior championship with Otmar, I think. And I think he won as a GP3 championship.
GP3 with ART, yeah.
So I think they've worked together before, so there's a decent working relationship.
Vasseur,
so maybe is what? Sorry,
Vasseur, isn't it?
Vasseur, that's it. Sorry, yeah, Otmar. That's Aston, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, that's it. Yes. So yeah, they had a working relationship together in GP3, and so maybe they've put their eggs in the basket for next year, because they have been pretty unremarkable. There are a couple of races where they showed up and were okay. Yeah. I feel kind of sad for Giovinazzi, because he actually seemed to do quite well and seem to have the measure of Kimi this year.
The thing is, he's had a very weird season, because if you were looking at it purely on qualifying pace, there's times when Gio's just looked unbelievably good. Putting that car in the top 10, it had no business to be there. Done it a few times. But he only had 3 points, but Kimi had 10. That's
Yeah.
That's a huge. I mean, I say it's a huge gap. All it takes is a couple of freak results, almost, or a bit of bad luck when you're at that end of this grid, you know. But
Yeah.
it, the if it, you know, if we're looking at the performances and looking at the way they drove and looking at where they qualified and stuff, if I hadn't seen the scores where they were at the end of the season, I wouldn't have believed it at all. You know, I'd have said, as you were saying, you know, he's shown up well against Kimi this year, but for some reason on race pace or just through bad luck or strategy going wrong or whatever else, he just seems to have got the rough end of it.
Yeah, and that's his third season as well,
Yeah.
and the fact that he's not been able to beat Kimi from one reason or another, maybe that's Kimi's experience of just kind of keeping out of stuff and sneaking the points here and there. But I feel
Yeah.
sorry for him because he's the sort of driver that is perfectly capable. He probably would never win a world championship, but he's perfectly capable. I think he'll do really well in Formula E if he can
Yeah.
kind of keep out of the more chaosy side of things. But he's a really good driver.
Yeah,
So I do feel sorry for him.
he's definitely got pace. Whether he's got like race stuff to go with it, I don't know. But we'll see how he does in Formula E. He has talent, that's for sure. I don't know whether we ever really saw the best of him. Certainly not during an actual race itself. Say some of the qualifying performances were immense, but that's where we are with that, unfortunately. So we have 3 points from that first bit. We couldn't even get the person in last right. Well,
I
we
feel
did
that
get
was
the person. We did get the person in last right. We couldn't get the person in 20th right.
Yeah, that was slightly extraneous circumstances, but then again, if we'd have thought about the world we live in now, would have been a reasonable prediction.
Yeah.
It could have been perfectly reasonable for one of us to say that Nico Hulkenberg would have been like 12th or something.
Yeah. All right. I don't. Shall we continue anyway for the next batch? Because we'll go up to say, I don't know, 7th on the discussing up
Yeah.
to there. That seems a fair
That sounds
split.
good.
Right. Okay. We have in 15th. I had Antonio Giovinazzi.
Yep. So I had Raikkonen in 15th.
Yeah, we've done
That was the one that we covered.
Yeah,
didn't
that
we?
was the last one.
Sorry.
Right. 14th then, Yuki Tsunoda.
And
Who
I
was
had
14th?
Esteban Ocon.
So 3 for me. Hey,
That was very good.
I know, I got lucky. I want not so much on the next one though, because maybe nope. I had 13th Esteban Ocon.
Yeah, we've both underrated Ocon there.
We
I
did
pick
a
up a
bit,
point
yeah.
because I've put Sonoda there.
You did. We'll come back to Ocon in a little while because we have lots to discuss in this bit.
Oh
if
god,
we-
I've just seen what the
If
next
we
one is actually.
if we seriously underestimated Esteban Ocon, I think we need to buy Pierre Gasly a pint. Because
Yes, is he-
12th, I've
yeah.
got Pierre Gasly.
Yes, so do I. Pierre, can I just? You'll never see this. Can I just publicly apologise? That's shocking.
we will come back to this. In 11th, I've got Lance Stroll.
Same here.
Yeah, he didn't do that well. In 10th, we both need to share that trip to the pub with Pierre, with Lando Norris.
Yes, we do, and yeah, we'll come back to what we're thinking about that, or what I'm not sure. What was okay?
We just need to take half the grid to the pub. I've got Carlos in 9th.
Fernando Alonso in 9th. So I've managed to scrape a point with
You have
Fernando
got
Alonso.
a point, yes. Well done. I've got Fernando in 8th.
And I've got Carlos Sainz in 8th.
Wrong Ferrari to get a
Yeah,
point.
unfortunate. Yeah.
So in 7th, I've got Daniel Ricciardo. So I got a point for that.
Ah, yes, you do. I don't for this one. Yeah, Sebastian Vettel is seventh. You could just say that and put it out there. Yes, Sebastian Vettel.
Yeah, and I've got Seb sixth, so miles off. And you might get another point.
Yeah, so I've got Charles in sixth. So I've managed to somehow scrape another point there.
Yep, we were going to leave the top five until we discuss this up.
Yes.
So where do we go with Yuki Tsunoda, 14th? AlphaTauri are a hard one to place because you had Pierre in 9th and Yuki Tsunoda in 14th. And the thing is, there was real moments, especially towards the end of the season, where Yuki looked so much better than 14th. You know, like he'd discovered... I mean, he'd worked apparently with Alex Albon. You know, obviously, he was having spent the season in the car. He was starting to get to grips with it a bit more. But he was actually a lot of the season he just looked lost, and at the end of the season he actually looked like a Formula One driver.
Yeah, and actually, to add to that, it's also at the start as well. He seemed to really hit the ground running in Bahrain.
Yeah.
Really good qualifying, scored points on his debut, and he had this kind of, he was slightly fiery, and he thought, oh, I quite like the attitude on this guy, and then he very quickly lost his way. And I don't know if it was maybe because of how consistently and how well Pierre was performing, and you think, okay, it's my teammate. Maybe it's just the fact that he had a bit of maybe not beginner's luck, but almost beginner's ignorance, and just kind of like, yep, I'm in a Formula One car, got it, and then all of a sudden, issues started to crop up, and maybe that got him in his own head. But yeah, as you said, it wasn't till the end that he started to show what he could do. And, he'd had a really good season before that. I was really looking forward to kind of, what he could do. And like, I've put him 13th, but I kind of, as based on the fact that I've put Gasly 12th, I think it was my more thinking that AlphaTauri weren't particularly going to do well rather than him personally. I thought he probably might have a decent season for his machinery. And it turns out, compared to his teammate, he didn't.
Well, I'm looking at I wrote down the number of points they had here. Pierre Gasly in 9th had 110 points. Yuki Tsunoda in 14th had 32. He had a third of the points of his teammate. Less than that. Yeah. I mean, the fact of the matter is we were saying about Pierre Gasly in the early part of the season. It was a lot on qualifying. He was immense. And in the races, it kept going wrong. So Pierre could have had a lot more than he had. That car had pace, and certainly in a qualifying trim.
Yeah.
So...
it's hard to know what to... do you kind of go, well, has Yuki underperformed there? Or has Pierre just been... like mercilessly consistent, because he was so good at kind of getting up into Q3, and like you say, he had a few moments where he didn't, but he's for the most part converted really well. So who do you not point the finger at, but who do you kind of think, right, okay, is it underperforming, overperforming, which way do you go?
Tsunoda showed his inexperience, I think, is what it comes down to. By the end of the year, as I said, he had improved a lot. I'm not surprised or whatever else that he's going to be there next season. Whereas I can't help thinking other drivers, perhaps if they'd have come in and put in that kind of performance earlier on in the year, would have been quite lucky to get to the next season. But so the last few races, he actually came back, looked quite impressive, I thought, from sort of Mexico onwards. So it's kind of a good recovery from him. I think he can take some positives into next season.
Yes, and I think as long as he focuses and doesn't get too much in his own head, because knowing who his employers are and what they're like for, cutting drivers who don't perform, if he can carry that form through, he's got a good chance of kind of, continuing on. But if he has another season where the consistency isn't there again, yeah, that seat could be open very quickly because I feel like Pierre is very much at home in that team.
Definitely.
But I also don't think Pierre is the sort of. I think Pierre is quite a good teammate to have as well. I don't feel that he'd be the sort of person that would.
There seemed to be a lot of camaraderie and good, stuff between the
Yeah,
pair of them. So you always wonder
yeah,
how much of it is like forced or put on, or a team sort of trying to make their drivers seem like they're friends and they're getting on fine and what have you. But it genuinely struck me that they got on well enough. It's like Pierre laughing and joking with Yuki's parents at various points and what have you. And like behind the scenes stuff. So, but he seems to be a genuinely good person to have in a team. Yeah, and at AlphaTauri, he sort of, whether it's the atmosphere there or whatever else, just the way the team works together, it is kind of a home for him, which in some ways is a great thing because it's resurrected his career. In other ways, it's a bit like, but does he want to spend his career at AlphaTauri? Because it's
yeah.
yeah,
Pierre Gasly is the sort of driver I think is he. He could go into other series and do brilliant things.
oh definitely,
The question is, is that what he wants to do, or is he still holding on to kind of doing something in Formula One? Could he maybe set his stall out and kind of bide his time at AlphaTauri, and then you never know when a seat might be going at Mercedes or Ferrari. How the landscape could change. Or to be fair, they may not even be the desirable seats after next season. So when the lay of the land has potentially changed, he could still find himself in a favourable position.
yeah.
Any other team, when you come into a rule change, you think, yeah, okay, got a chance here. It's just unfortunate that he's in the one team that is the sister team to another team on the grid. So it seems very unlikely that they will even if they are one of the best teams on the grid, you'd probably assume that there's going to be one other that is ahead of them.
There is a
So he's kind of
strange,
got a ceiling
yeah.
on it.
There is a strange relationship that AlphaTauri have with Red Bull because Red Bull have changed the way they refer to them as, because it always used to be like the junior team or the whatever, that they were growing drivers in there for potential Red Bull drivers, and then suddenly it's like, okay, we don't know what to do with Pierre, but we don't want to get rid of him. I know, sister team. AlphaTauri can be a sister team, but as you said, even if they get it right next year, does that mean that they're going to be actively, openly able to race against the Red Bull, like works team? It's unlikely. So
No, well, you saw what happened in Qatar, where there was that odd overtake moment from Max, where it's like it was Gasly as well, I think, where he just
yeah,
goes randomly wide at the exit of the final turn, and you think it's basic. It looks like team orders without being team or it looked like really suspicious. It's just like, what is your relationship, and
yeah. So
you know, does
get
it
out
need
of the way
defining a bit
without making
clearer?
it obvious.
Yeah. Yeah, it was an odd one. So yeah, it's just find it very strange. But yeah,
We need to move on to some of the other teams now. Now the
yes,
question is, which of the ones beginning with A do we start with? Because we've got seriously misjudged many things about the pair of them.
yeah,
Shall we say Aston to start?
yeah.
Because
Let's get this one out of the way because I think some maybe wishful thinking and unconscious bias played a part in this one because I obviously wanted Aston Martin to do well. Aston Martin is my favorite car brand outside of Formula One. Always, if I was ever to win the lottery and I was going to have a dream car, I would immediately want an Aston Martin. So I was really happy to see them in the sport. Obviously, coming off the back of Racing Point, sorry, in 2020, where obviously
yeah,
they had a very good car for one reason or another. So you think, well, okay, we've got a good car brand behind it now, developing into this final year. There's absolutely no reason why they're not going to have another strong season. And that rule we mentioned that we kind of overlooked meant they didn't quite have the season we were expecting.
no. I mean, I'm looking at the numbers here, and Pierre Gasly outscored Aston Martin by 33 points.
I mean,
I said, I think I'd originally put them lower, but I think they'll do better because there's a lot of Mercedes DNA in there. Not realizing that the rule change would mean that was a disadvantage.
yeah. I overlooked that entirely as well, and I was very much of the thinking that, you know what, Sebastian Vettel is not a bad driver. He had a bad final season at Ferrari. And to be fair, all things considered, I think he's had a relatively good season with Aston Martin. I just think the car just wasn't there this season. There's a very good chance that they might have abandoned ship on it quite early, but that's speculation.
I mean, Seb's year was great until it wasn't, like fighting hard or whatever, the most overtakes of the year. I mean, you don't do that if you're having like a completely shocking year. But it's like when he got it wrong, he got it wrong. Like unforced errors, like his spin, I think it was in Silverstone and things like that, And it's like the moment sort of you started talking, not a great start to the year, but, we put that down to changing teams, various other things. And so the moment you start talking him up because you put some good results in a row, suddenly it's all like down again. And we know the Seb we want to see. We know what on his good days he's capable of. They've took him to Aston Martin for a reason because, he is a 4-time world champion. He does have bags of experience. I mean, I don't know enough about like aero and what effects like the new regs coming in next year are going to have on the car, but will it make the rear end more stable, which should suit his driving style? Will we see more of the old Seb back if he can manipulate the car more the way he wants? Or is he going to find the thing completely terrible and hate every second of it and just want to run away from it? We don't kind of know. It's the problem.
Yeah, he's a brilliant driver when he has the car the way he wants it. And one of the questions we kind of asked, I think maybe in the first video as well, was who's going to be kind of leading the development on it? Because obviously you'd assume that Sebastian Vettel would be the lead driver in that team, but obviously the team is owned by Lawrence Stroll, and Lance Stroll is driving for them. So it's like, okay, so whose driving style are they going to cater for more? Are they going to kind of just do some weird thing where actually they try and tick as much boxes for both drivers? Yeah, it depends so much on what the regs and what car they make on how well Seb does. It's I was expecting more, unfortunately, and it didn't quite come.
Yeah, Lance Stroll's a weird one, though. I mean, it's like on the one hand, he was only one place off Seb, so we'll be saying that's an improvement. On the other hand, he was 9 points behind, sorry. But at that end of where they're talking in terms of points scoring, 9 points is quite a thing. Lance was closer to Yuki, significantly closer to Yuki in points than he was Seb. But yet
and that's
on the track
gap,
they seem to be
near
each other rather a lot, getting in each other's way and tripping over each other on occasion. But developing, but I don't think enough.
Yeah, and I again think, well, how far do you go? Like Mercedes with the low rate concept, they had to develop it. They wanted to be in a title fight, whereas Aston Martin probably had the luxury of at least being able to kind of abandon it earlier when they know full well, okay, there's probably not going to be, apart from scraps on the table. So I maybe think that they did kind of abandon ship quite early. It's just what direction they've gone in. But yeah, I would say the gap, it's quite odd. They are very much kind of the leaders of like the bottom part of the table because, like you say, it's quite tightly packed in terms of points. And then obviously there's a huge gap between Vettel and Ocon, that sort of step between them, and it is just kind of they were the It's hard. It's hard to judge how with Lance. I'm still he's a talented driver, but again, is he? I'm not sure how much more we can see out of him, really.
He has good days, but he doesn't have enough good days. Right. We sort of dealt with them. I think what it comes down to with Aston Martin is we joked about how they'd copied Mercedes' homework. And the thing is, when you copy someone's homework, the person who done it originally knows how they got them answers and can
Yeah.
work back from there if necessary. If you're copying it, you haven't necessarily worked it out. And I think that's why Merck still managed to recover some performance, because they understood better what they'd been lost and how to counterbalance it. Whereas with Aston, it's a bit like, at this point, we may as well race what we've brought and concentrate on next year, because they didn't have anything really to gain.
Yeah, and I think, if they didn't do that, I don't see why not, to be fair, because that's, like you say, there's nothing else going for them other than scraps here and there. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping to see a much more competitive... I think a lot of these will be thinking long term. I think, when, Lawrence bought the team, he spoke very long term about wanting it to be back up there. So if they weren't thinking for 2022, I'd be very surprised.
Yeah. Sort of moving on to the next team, really. I think Alpine sort of finished... Well, I think we thought they'd end up where Aston Martin were for some reason. As in, like, a newish name onto the grid, focusing on the new regs, perhaps not really bringing it this year. They'd been talking pre-season about not bringing any upgrades or whatever else and focusing on 2022. But they finished significantly ahead. I mean, Ocon had twice the points of, Lance Stroll and then some. And Fernando, had 7 more points than him. So 10th and 11th, very difficult to separate them, actually. When you think Ocon had that win. And
which has just been so glazed over as well. It's considering that happened.
Fernando still finished ahead of him. But it's like Fernando, for me, didn't have like the raw pace of old, but he still had the sort of guile on track, if you know what I mean. The sort of mischievous twinkle in the eye and the sheer sort of determination to sort of exact everything he could out of his car or the other person's necessarily, if working around how to take advantage of them. He hasn't lost anything for not being in Formula One, so maybe a 10th in terms of raw pace. But you give him a top car, he'll still do damage with it.
Oh, his experience has been, played such a vital part this season. Because, he, apart from, obviously, his heroic defending against Hamilton in Hungary, I can't think of any other, huge grandstand moments. He just kind of quietly went about his business and he got the car into good positions, whether it was strategy, whether it was, And again, Alpine were a team where some weekends they seemed like they had a quick car, others they weren't quite there. Very much got stronger towards the end of the season, I felt. But he just went about his business so well. And, I think Alpine have done really well this season. But again, this kind of, still this narrative of like, well, okay, so at what point did they stop thinking about this season? And move on to the next? Because again, similar to Aston Martin, you think, well, nothing to really keep you with this season in terms of, developing too far into it. Because, apart from the points and picking up something, what you're going to get. But I feel like they were still working and improving their car till quite late in the year. The fact that Ocon just missed out on a podium in Jeddah as well. It's, they were pretty strong and got stronger, if anything.
What I find interesting about them is we were saying pre-season about Fernando going back there. They've brought him back in for a reason. All the experience, he's hungry, he still wants to be successful. He's like a kind of like alpha driver going into that environment. He knows how to manipulate the team to work for him. And then Esteban Ocon, of course, after the Hungary one, was like, I don't know what the trouble is. Like, Fernando's a brilliant guy to work with. I don't know if they'd still be saying that if they were fighting for a title, but you know, I don't know. I'd say it's possible, like the working at Toyota, for example, where you're not just a member of a team, but you're sharing a car with two other people, and you have to work closely with them to maximise what it can do at all, all counts. I don't know how much that has possibly influenced how he might go around dealing with teams, teammates, or whatever, knowing that it's not just necessarily about him. It's maximising everyone in the team, including the communication with your teammates, so you push together forward. But of course, it could also be that we don't, as part of the English press or whatever else, Alonso reckons that the English press love to be on his case and just show his bad side. So is it a case of he was always kind of that way? It's just that we never necessarily saw it.
It's a very genuine possibility, and I think now, because more than ever, I think it's easy for news outlets to push a singular narrative against someone, because there's so many ways for drivers and teams to communicate stuff about their team. And sure, like you say, some of it could be forced, it might not always be genuine, but even in that you can kind of gauge stuff. And there's no getting around that Fernando said some stuff that very much wound people up, especially when he wasn't in the sport, saying stuff about, he knows how to be a Hamilton and this stuff. But that was entirely his intention, and he was kind of just like, I'm still here, and I'm not done with Formula One, so don't be done with me.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I can't answer honestly about if he was always like this, but I definitely feel like he has softened. There is something about him, and maybe that is just being away from a title fight. Toyota, mentioning Toyota was interesting because, Toyota, when they were in Formula One, one of the reasons that kind of got put down for their failure in Formula One was they didn't play the F1 game. Toyota have a set way of doing things in-house.
Yeah.
And they very much like to follow this own ethos of that, we do things the Toyota way and we work to this way, and this is how we achieve success. The problem is in Formula One, they kind of lost out on a lot of political things on the political side of Formula One, because they were just kind of this lone wolf and didn't kind of make alliances or kind of get as involved in the paddock and with discussions. So if there was a rule change or if something was happening, they would be the last to kind of react to it.
Yeah. Mike Gascoigne sort of said, the thing with your Formula One team is you have to be able to react quickly. And what Toyota couldn't do was react quickly, because everything had to go through a boardroom and discussions and meetings and whatever. It didn't let the F1 team run itself. It had, the F1 team was part of the whole Toyota giant problem, and it didn't have the flexibility to do what it needed to do to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why they failed in Formula One. But obviously, in other disciplines, it works for them. It's been working for them in World Endurance Championship and Le Mans, and maybe Alonso's experience working that way. Of course,
but yeah.
Well, yeah, that's true. That is true. But yeah, I think maybe
in fairness, other
Alonso's
teams could have stayed as well.
That.
So,
Well, yeah, I know it's it's going to be interesting when this new era. There's obviously quite a few coming back, so we'll see how well they do with kind of actual competition. But yeah, I think maybe Alonso's experience working in a company like that, not just in the competition, but maybe in a company like that, has made him kind of learn a few things and see how things can be done slightly differently. So maybe, like you say, he's less lone wolfy now and is kind of softened. I don't think he's lost any of his guile or any of his will to win, but I think he's probably a lot smarter about it now.
Yeah, hopefully so. I mean, I think Formula One only gains from seeing a hungry, competitive Fernando, because yes, he's older, but for the next couple of years, let's kind of enjoy what he might be able to bring in just terms of. It's quite fascinating, just in terms of the way he acts, the way he reacts, and the racing. The racecraft is very, very good. So, it's going to be exciting to see what he and they do next. Will they get it right? Because, you know, Alpine, Aston, they're all teams which, with the budget cap set where it is, could shake the apple cart. They could be right up there. So it will be interesting to see if any of them do sort of find some magic thing which will put them properly into the championship mix. Alonso, if he got a sniff of a championship, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, it would be great to see him back in the mix. It really would. And I wouldn't have said that a few years ago, but actually, you kind of come to appreciate what he's really good at and how, the things he does well. And actually, to have that to have that back in the mix would be awesome.
Yeah. Right. We are down to our top 6, I think it is.
Yes.
We'll leave discussing Ferrari and McLaren perhaps till we've covered down to the top 4, because they are just another thing to themselves, to be honest with you. And it's like, while the midfield was the midfield still, I kind of feel like Ferrari and McLaren, especially if you look at their points compared to the others below them, they were sort of in a class again almost to themselves, which we certainly didn't think was going to be the case pre-season. We thought the midfield would be a lot closer than it has been. McLaren are the ones that are funny for me because I said I was going to talk about them after we talked about it. Right, so we'll cover the next 2 drivers and then talk Ferrari and McLaren, because this battle was just, I'm a Ferrari fan, and it's sort of like I was really enjoying every second of this fight between us for 3rd place. So in 6th place, completely off topic because I really badly misjudged it, I had Sebastian Vettel.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. Yeah, I had him 7th, so yeah, that's I had Charles Leclerc in 6th, which
you get a point. You get a point.
Which is surprising. I didn't think I'd be overestimating him, but there we are.
Well, the thing is, what really does it is that he was in 5th place for so long. Him and Lando were fighting for that 5th place for so long. Carlos, I think, was ahead of Charles at 2 points this whole season. Charles pretty much had the measure of him, but it's things like Monaco and Hungary. I'll come back to it in a little while, but there was only like 5.5 points from between 5th and 7th. That's it.
Yeah.
So in 5th place I had Charles Leclerc, so I don't get a point.
And I had Daniel Ricciardo, so I also don't get a point.
Okay. In 4th? No, that was the 2 we were going to deal with, wasn't it? I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah. Yep. Right, so going back to what I was saying, basically, I said, Ferrari could be back in the fight for 3rd. Really looking forward to it. I've enjoyed the fight for 3rd all season. At various points, I've completely ignored the battle for the championship win because Ferrari versus McLaren, it's all about Ferrari versus McLaren. I'm sorry, the rest of the world. This is an important fight. Tale of 2 halves of the season, really. I think Lando, especially the opening part of the year, the first half of the year, pretty much had 5th place. Sometimes he was 3rd in the Drivers' Championship at one point. In the early part of the year, he really was on a proper run, looked very impressive. But I think some bad luck mid-season. I mean, qualifying, for example, at Belgium, he looked like the quickest guy out there and then smashed it into the wall. So, that obviously, if he'd have put it top 3 like he showed, like it looked like he could have done if it hadn't been for that accident, that would have been another healthy haul of points. Again, like Charles, got very unlucky in the fallout at Hungary. So he lost a lot of points. Charles, with obviously what happened at qualifying in Monaco, if they'd have got that car fixed, and it had been able to start the race, is that a huge amount of points gone begging there. Hungary as well got taken out when the Lance Stroll, what line are you taking through that first corner incident? And these are all instances where Charles's teammate Carlos absolutely, he took home a massive bag of points out of it when Charles obviously lost potentially, I don't know, should we be polite and say 40? It's not beyond the realms of possibility. So, I mean, I was looking at the stats or something, and it was like, in the races, you obviously had it where, Carlos had 4 podiums to Charles's 1, but Charles finished ahead of him 14-8. Bearing in mind, 2 of them 8 were because of DNFs, or it was starts even in the case of Monaco, neither of which were actually anything to do with Charles's fault. So Carlos did a great job, but I think the numbers don't tell the story.
No, it's a really, really, Monaco is one of the big talking points, because you think Ferrari maybe they got a little bit carried away, and you just think, bite the bullet and change the gearbox, and you're fine. And you know what? You're not going to win the race, unfortunately, and it's a shame because you had pole, but there's a really good chance that weekend you are, scoring some decent points, even with the penalty.
The thing is, they didn't even check the car right, because they because it collided with the wall on like the right side. They checked the right side over and not the left drive shaft.
Why would you check everything? Check everything.
Yeah. So, God.
Yeah, but it's just typical Ferrari F1 things, isn't it? It's exactly the sort of thing you come to sadly expect. I'm sorry, but yeah, with that, I think it's one of the big talking points. And like you say, Charles was unlucky. They were both really good. I think Carlos has been quietly brilliant. He's come into a team where I think Charles is the number one without being defined as the number one. And he's come in and just gotten on with it and done his work. Like you say, there are some moments where you think he could go either way.
The pair of them have complemented each other superbly in terms of what they both bring to the table.
Oh, yeah. And even though they are very much competitive with each other, there doesn't seem to be that needle or power struggle that Charles and Seb had. Because, they're just as close. It's just the fact that there doesn't seem to be this big internal political battle. It's just, we've got 2 drivers. They're both going about their business. They're close, but, I feel like if it was Charles and Seb going that close for points, that would be a big subplot of the season. Whereas actually,
Netflix would have a great thing going on about the rivalry, and every small look would be amplified and whatever else. The fact of the matter is, Charles and Seb got on brilliantly off the track.
Yeah.
On track, it was just the competitive thing to try and be the best and get the best out of what they had, and sometimes that overspilled a little bit, perhaps. But
yeah, and I think they've managed to handle it this season a lot better for whatever reason. Whether that is, they've changed their approach and learned some lessons. Maybe it's just the fact that the sort of person Carlos is, I don't know. But yeah, he's just quietly gone about his business and had a really, really good season. But like you say, it's fine margins between, what order they finished in. Just a few bad, bad races here and there. Again, I think a lot of it as well is, what did McLaren switch off towards the end of the season, and did they change focus? Because it was a really intense battle, and then all of a sudden Ferrari would just pummeling them for points, and there was like a head-to-head coming into Abu Dhabi where like McLaren had only scored like single figure points and Ferrari had like 30 odd, and it's like, what's happened there? Like, it completely changed their battle.
Yeah, several things happened kind of all at once. The thing is, we're sort of talking about Daniel Ricciardo here, and he finished 8th, which you'd normally think isn't like ridiculous, but he finished 45 points behind his teammate when he won the race that McLaren won.
Yeah.
It's like he wasn't totally invisible this year, but I mean, even after he won the race, we're thinking, yeah, Daniel Ricciardo's back. I mean, I'm a Ferrari fan. I was thinking, yeah, it's great to see them get a win. You know, Daniel, after the season, he's have come back and do well. But then he sort of just vaguely disappeared a little bit again into the background. You know, even when any moves were being taken, any qualifying performances that were coming in, it was always Lando who was putting them in. I mean, the end of the season Lando had, you had obviously the incident in Spa, you had being taken out in Hungary, you had in Russia where he was leading the race and then the weather changed. If that weather had come in like 2 laps later or been slightly lighter, he'd have potentially won that race. You know, you had 2 punches at the end of the season when he was running well in the points. You know, it's like how good his first half of the year was how bad his second half of the year was, and how bad the second half of the year was for the most part wasn't really his fault. It just like bad luck. Sometimes it happens. You know, I mean, the fact is he still finished in between the 2 Ferrari drivers.
Yeah.
You know.
But again, a lot of it on the strength, I think, of, like you say, his first half of the season. Because, like you say, he was up as high as 3rd at one point. Danny Ricciardo, I honestly, I've never seen him struggle so much. Like, even at Renault, like, okay, his first season at Renault was quite nondescript, but he was still very much doing the best with what he had. You felt like, okay, that Renault car that year wasn't great, but I think he's doing an all right job with it. Then, obviously, second season with them, some decent results before moving on. This year, he's just seemed... I've never seen him so not out of his depth, but he just doesn't seem comfortable. And like you say, he was able to win in Monza because McLaren was strong that weekend, and he was stronger than Lando that weekend. But yeah, he's just not looked comfortable and not adapted. And is it the way the car and the team, the direction they've gone in with Lando, or I don't know. And
some of it is just simply down to the McLaren. Apparently, they were saying for the last couple of years, possibly coming off the back of Honda and like getting a few things wrong in terms of the chassis setup and whatever else. So obviously they've been now having to develop pretty much from scratch or whatever. And obviously Lando's been there while they've been developing that. So, I mean, he said himself he kind of has to adjust how he normally wants to drive to the car because the car isn't easy. And I think if you're coming into a new team, you have to have confidence and faith in the car. And if it's difficult, it can sometimes be a struggle to get to grips with how to get it to work. Daniel's never struck me as someone who'd had difficulty picking up a new style before, but I know with the brakes, when he first went to Renault, he had trouble getting the confidence with them. So, and he is a confidence driver, so there's a lot of options. Again, it all changes again next year, so it's like, how's that going to work? Because we've no idea which teams even are going to be strong next year, never mind which drivers are necessarily going to work well with the new cars and all that stuff. I mean, I don't want to do a predictions video for next year because it's just going to be me putting names in a hat and just throwing it in the air, going wherever it lands.
Well, yeah, I had the exact same thought, thinking, well, look, this is how well we've done when we've got some idea of form. Imagine how well to be honest, ironically, we'd probably end up doing better just because, like you say, it would just be cool. Yuki Tsunoda, World Drivers' Champion. Oh, well, I guess that's what we'll go.
I said that a couple of years ago. I did that where I made my own predictions for what I thought, and then picked names out of a hat just for the sake of it to give me a rival point of reference. And I had Kevin Magnussen finishing second, I think it was. Didn't quite work out that way, but
in some universe, I'm sure he would have done. But yeah, no, unfortunately, no.
Right, we really need to discuss the top 4, of course. In 4th place, we both had Sergio Perez. So there's a big fat 3 for the pair of us.
Lovely stuff. Right, then it goes wrong.
A little bit, maybe. I had Valtteri Bottas in third.
Okay, so point for you, not for me. I had Max Verstappen.
That's 3 points for me, but you will get a point because he was on second. No.
Oh yes, that's true. Yep.
Yep. So.
And
Right.
then
Yep. And no, I'm completely. What am I talking? Yes. And obviously in second, I had Max.
yes, I had Valtteri, and then Hamilton as number one.
Yeah. So we. Right. I mean, missing the slight thing here, whereby obviously, I mean, Sergio, we thought originally, and there was a lot of discussion about how he was coming into the team. He was an experienced driver. You know, he'd won a race the previous year. You know, he could he potentially push Max? You know, would he be closer? Would he be taking points off Max? I think was one suggestion for why you put Max as third. But what we did say and what did play out was that he would give Mercedes, potentially from a strategy point of view, something else to think about. And whilst he wasn't sort of in with the lead group on pace, you know, it's like there were times when basically Red Bull strategy was almost dominated by having to think about what Valtteri was doing and having to work around him because Valtteri was still in the fight. So if Lewis went long and Valtteri went short, what was Max going to have to do? And Perez never quite got into that kind of position, but quite often he had a big effect because he'd found himself sort of on old tyres with Lewis having to get past him during the season. And the Lewis and Sergio fights, quite honestly, were some of the best fights I thought we'd seen. Yeah, it's just Sergio was not afraid to come back at Lewis when Lewis went for a move, but it was clean.
Oh
You
yeah, the
know,
racecraft between them was brilliant.
yeah.
So good. Because obviously, you know, Abu Dhabi's fresh in the memory, but was the Turkey was the other good one, wasn't it? I think
I think it was
where they.
Brazil, possibly. But they're both counterclockwise tracks, so you know it's easy to.
Yeah. But yeah, they had a really a couple of times. Yeah, Perez has been the perfect wingman this season for Max. And you know, okay, he hasn't ended up being as close to him as I potentially thought he would. He has managed to win a race, albeit under slightly auspicious circumstances with that you know,
Yeah.
the tyre blowouts in Azerbaijan and the you know, ad hoc sprint race. But he's been really solid. He's had a comparable season to Valtteri, really, where he's not always been where his team would want him, i.e., second or third. Sometimes they've been a little bit further back,
Yeah.
but they've at least managed to get themselves into positions where, like you say, they can at least play a part strategy-wise.
Yeah.
You're not giving your opponents a free pit stop, or you know, if it's coming to it on track. Yeah, he's definitely been better than Valtteri in terms of if he's got a rival car in the mirrors, he's been brilliant defending and trying to hold up and cause problems.
What we sort of said this about them is like Valtteri and Sergio have got very different skill sets almost. You know, Valtteri is one of, in a single lap on a qualifying run, is one of the quickest guys out there, which means he can normally put himself on the front couple of rows and be in the mix at the start of the race at least, causing issues. Whereas Sergio, in terms of quali, is perhaps not really his best thing, which means he's then sort of having to sort of go forward during the race to try and sort of, you know, so it's sort of like it's then later on in the race when he might play more of a strategic part or something. But the thing is, it's like Red Bull Max won under slightly contentious circumstances the Drivers' Championship. By comparison, Sergio was 36 points off Valtteri, and we're saying they had a comparable season.
Yeah, it's weird that I think, I think this happened to Valtteri a lot during his time at Mercedes, where it's when you've got someone performing as well as Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
You know, people said, "Oh, he's not good enough for the seat." Especially when people wanted George to get the seat as well.
Yeah, definitely.
he's like, he's not good enough. And I think the issue is, you know what, you're right. In the end, obviously, he's done his job. He's, like I said before, he's helped Mercedes to an 8th consecutive constructors championship. I think the reason why it's comparable is you look at kind of flashpoints with them, where you think, okay, there's a chance for Valtteri to play a key part in the title fight, and it's kind of like, oh, he's got past him. Oh, he's lost the place. Oh, he's not had a good start. It's those key flashpoints because you're completely right. Actually, yeah, Valtteri is firmly managed to recover to 3rd, but
it's that weird thing where Valtteri did a better job for Mercedes than Sergio perhaps did for Red Bull, but Sergio perhaps did a better job for Max than Valtteri did for Lewis.
Yeah, that's it. Absolutely. that's it.
Weirdly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm tempted to just sort of say screw it and give us 3 points each for as far as us putting Lewis top goes, because quite frankly, if toss a coin, FIA, Michael Massey. Us discussing that is an entire video all on its own if we wanted to do it at some point. But
it is, yeah.
Yeah, basically the fallout is race directors should not, at the end of the race, make the rules up as they go along, and he chose to. That I'm not saying at any point, any way, stretch or form that Max doesn't deserve the title. He does. He had a great year. He did all the things he needed to do. He got the best out of the package that he could get out of it. And, but for some bad luck, he would have wrapped the title up earlier. So,
yeah.
But for it to be decided in the way it was, I don't think was correct. So
no, not at all. It does both of them a disservice.
Yeah.
And I think it's clear to say it's not. I don't think it's bias in the way it was done. It was purely a decision for the show to make sure that there was this big grandstand storybook finish, and the way it was manipulated to do so was just silly and frustrating, because actually the answer had already been presented once before in the season in Azerbaijan. You just throw a red flag and you have a ad hoc sprint race. I don't necessarily agree with that. I didn't, as dramatic and as kind of memorable as it was, I didn't like that. I've very much grown up where I'm used to seeing some races just finish under the safety car. Fine, you don't have to throw a red flag every single time. The race just will come to an end. Is what it is. Some football matches end in a dull 0-0. Don't just throw a penalty shootout in for the sake of it. It's akin to that. It really is. And I hate the direction that's been taken to kind of prioritize the show. To the point where you question some decisions. Like, it's been questioned even before this about I think it was Brazil 2019, where it was like, did you need a full safety car for that? Surely you could have just done a virtual safety car, but have you just done a safety car to... But you know what I mean? You're questioning race director decisions on, are you doing this on safety and what's the best for the race?
The thing is, I mean, I don't watch NASCAR, but I know from, you listen to people talking about that. It's like how they sort of juice you up or spice it up by having the safety cars more often and having this and having that and having the other. And everyone likes seeing a big shunt and it's exciting and all this sort of stuff. And there is a worry that F1 might be starting to slip a bit too far down those sort of routes because, it's exciting and people want to see drama and people want to see... So whether it's the Netflix effect, whether it's American owners thinking, this will be a good look, trying to attract whatever, I don't know. I mean, it's like, sort of like with the sprint race thing where, you've had people like Ross Brawn trying to push this agenda all year that, people want this. Him and is it Simmons are both stepping down in the near future. So is it like they've had enough of trying to beat something
Yeah, I don't know, and that is a genuine concern as well. That it's changing the fabric of it, and I hope that they listen to what fans are saying, because the fact is we're now not talking about the championship, we're talking about this instead. And like you say, it could be a whole video and a whole series into itself. I've toyed with the idea of talking about it myself, but it's just like, where do you start, where does it end? And it's quite worrying, because I've never seen, loads of people have said, oh, Formula One's not the way it used to be, but it's like Formula One is constantly evolving and you get used to that. But there has always been like a through line of what Formula One is, about the entertainment it provides, about the sort of racing it provides.
Yeah.
And this is the first time where I'm like, I feel like you're changing something fundamental about it. Yeah. I'm not worried about the new regs. The cars will look different. Hopefully it'll bring closer racing. Great stuff. Another era. Here we go. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
But those changes, those race director changes, those changes to make it more of a show, they concern me. And like I say, it takes the focus away from what's really important. Like, loads of people said, 2021, one of the greatest seasons ever. Yeah, on track alone, quite possibly. But unfortunately, F1 has never just been about what's only on the track. And when you take in everything that comes with it, it's been sadly tainted for me. And not even by the drivers, but again, by the powers that be, unfortunately.
Again, there's always this big conundrum of all these sporting events and whatever else. Is it a sport? Is it entertainment? I mean, entertainment, whatever else is popular. You look at bloody wrestling or whatever, for example. Everyone knows what it is, but people still watch it. People still get excited for it, seeing people doing stuff, which in fairness, it doesn't matter if it's supposed to be dramatized, made up, planned out beforehand or whatever else. People are still sort of knocking each other over and stuff. It has the potential to go horribly wrong, Yeah. And I suppose it's what the media and Liberty Media and whatever and the FIA will say about racing cars to a certain extent is, even if they do dramatise it a little bit, people are still driving ridiculously fast cars ridiculously quickly, and if it goes wrong, it's still going to hurt the people who are doing it. So there's still jeopardy and whatever else to it. I don't know. But
there is, but my feeling is, if you let's take the wrestling analogy. Yeah. If you were to then make similar changes to something like UFC or boxing, to make it more like WWE, which is scripted, and this isn't like a slam. Sorry, slam. That was a pun. A slam on like wrestlers, because obviously they're still athletes. I saw what happened to Louis Theroux when he questioned is it real or not. They did not take kindly to that. It's not the fact they're not athletes and they're not professionals. It's the fact that the difference between sport and entertainment is there is no script to sport. Anything can happen. Sometimes that means what happens is quite boring or is one-sided. Sometimes it is the tussle for the ages, but the fact that it's happening and it's authentic and it's real, that should be enough. And that's what we got given on a plate this season. So even if the championship had finished under safety car or with 5-lap red flag, if it just finished in any other way than it did, I think it would be fine.
Yeah, that's my take on it. Exactly. If red flag, or if they'd have had enough laps to run the full safety car and say Max had just got the jump on Lewis under the red flag, or Mercedes, as it had played out, they hadn't pitted and Max had, and Max, they would run the full safety car thing, I would just go, well, that's kind of how it goes. But it's the abridged thing, of the making it up as they went along, and we'll just do this and we'll just do that. It's like, well, okay, you let 5 cars go. What about the other cars? Because to get a title fight going on into the last lap, and isn't it going to be exciting? You're screwing over so many other people's races. I don't know.
And it's the through line from other things as well. It's not like it's just this. It's like track limits throughout this season have been irritating. There was a point
Yeah.
where track limits was if you get all four wheels outside the white lines, that's it. You're outside of track limits. But
Yeah.
now they don't enforce them consistently between tracks, and it's like, oh, you can go onto the curbs here, but not here. And then there's been multiple times this season where I've not enforced them consistently on a single race weekend, all the way back to Bahrain.
We had it in Bahrain where they didn't even enforce it consistently in the race.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Should we actually talk about the teams rundown? I'm thinking because there's only 10 of them, we go for like 1 point if we get it right.
Yep, that sounds good to me.
Cool. In 10th place, we knew they would be bad. We did not know they would be this bad. We had Haas.
Haas, yes, please.
Yeah, we both had that. So 1 point each for that. In 9th place, we actually really had Williams, which was terrible for the pair of us.
Yeah, I think it was the thought that again, because they were coming from so far back, they would maybe get in the mix, but not ahead of Alpha. But yeah, turns out not.
Was it just expecting they wouldn't be so good, or was it just expecting Alpha should have been better?
Yeah, I think possibly that. Yeah.
And the thing is, it wasn't even close. There's a 10-point gap between them.
No, and yeah, they very much were the better. I mean, you could argue there's a superfluous result with that Belgian Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Not to go back to FIA nonsense, but yeah, there's that in there as well. But even without that, yeah, Williams would have been better.
Right. Well, we were still on the same for 8th, which we got wrong because we said Alpha. We were still on for 7th, where we both agreed because we said Alpha, the other Alpha. We were still agreeing about 6th place because we said Alpine. How right is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's wrong as well.
Not. No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, we weren't right about Alpha either. So it's all gone horribly wrong up until 5th place, where I said McLaren and you said Aston. So we were both wrong on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
4th place, I said Aston, you said Ferrari. So we were both wrong on that. 3rd place, yep. I said Ferrari. Point for me. Wow.
Being a fan has managed to grab you a point there. I think that's...
Quite possibly. Right, and we have 2 points each for the top two because it was the might predictable, I suppose, really. Red Bull, I mean, all things considered, if you looked at them at the start of the year, we looked at them in testing, did we think Mercedes were going to win the team's championship?
They've done an incredible job to recover. I mean, they haven't been... Considering as well, I think in terms of strategy, they've been the weaker of the two. There have been so many occasions where Red Bull have been tighter on their strategy and managed to pull things back their way.
I'll tell you what it is.
Even considering that.
Mercedes are rusty. Because they haven't had to do strategy for the last 7 years.
No.
You know, their only issue with strategy was which of their own drivers might lose out because of that.
Yeah, and it was only really a super issue internally up until about 2016, and then it kind of went away, and it wasn't really that much of a problem.
It's a little bit of an issue, niggle, of maybe having to think about what Ferrari were doing at the start of 17 and 18, but, you know, it's like... This is the first year where genuinely they've had to really properly pay attention to it. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, the totals for the teams one, I had 4 points out of a potential 10.
I got 3
out of a potential 10. Yep. And for the drivers one, out of a potential 60 points, if we include Mr. Kubica.
Yeah.
I had 15. You had 12.
I actually only thought I got 11, but I'll take 12. It's the same. The result's the same.
I may have miscounted it, but I don't know. But that's what I had. So, this is all our years of Formula One, all our experience at watching it and talking about it, and
That's what we, yeah. And this will be our last YouTube video. Thank you.
oh dear. Well,
But that's the
if you're
beautiful
gonna go
unpredictability of live sport. That's why we love live sport.
well, this is the
And
thing.
not
It's
scripted drama.
I mean, the thing is, this year wasn't even supposed to happen. COVID made this season happen the way it's happened. We wouldn't have even got this. And it's been
think, isn't it?
so strange and so unpredictable. I mean, I know a lot of people have sort of said, oh, the whole regulation about the floor thing was just to, stop Mercedes and stuff. But, yeah, they were trying to come up with ways to slow down cars, because Pirelli, for the year that it was coming in, didn't think that basically they'd be able to develop things which could deal with the cars as the speed and stuff that they were expecting them to end up at if we had another year of our normal development and normal progression and stuff. So they were trying to find ways of slowing them down, and this chopping the floor off the way they did seemed to them to be the easiest and most simple solution. The fact that it did slow down Mercedes enough so that we had what turned out to be a hell of a title fight. They still won the team's championship. Lewis still had a great season. I know there's a lot of people who feel gypped about the way it turned out, but it's sort of like we have to kind of appreciate the battle and whatever else that we have seen, I think.
Yeah.
As I said, there's a lot about the season that we hope they'll have a serious look at and get on top of for the coming years. But 2021, I think, still, hopefully for the right reasons as well as the wrong reasons, will be talked about for a very long time. So.
I think so, and even though I've just missed it in terms of watching it live, but from looking back at it and from kind of research, to me this and 1994 have quite a lot in common in terms of the season, because of how there was a lot of issues with the FIA going on in the background of the sport, being forced to kind of make changes, obviously for 1994 for very different reasons. Obviously a contentious ending for both seasons and how it was handled. And also the fact that on track you had two very fierce rivals and things got really quite bad-tempered and nasty. There were cheating accusations, there was race disqualifications in 94. This time around, again, it got just as heated. I think those two seasons, when the dust is settled, will have a lot in common with each other. And yeah, I think as long as they make the fixes going forward, the FIA, and this doesn't become like a signal for them going down a certain path, then I think those things will fade, and hopefully we will be able to remember that these amazing things we've got to see live. And after, such a period of dominance, it's, and like you say, this was never meant to happen. It's been quite a season. I still feel very, very raw about how it ended. Not, again, and similar to you, I don't begrudge Max winning it.
Yeah.
He's a very, very worthy world champion. When you look at his consistency and his stats throughout the season, you just think, well, you know what? Yeah, it's hard to argue with it. It is just that final decision. But there's been loads of flashpoints throughout the season you could argue on for days.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to think that this will kind of go down as a season like 1994. That's kind of what it leaps out at for me.
Yeah, no, that's all completely fair. I mean, 94 is not it's one of them years, a bit like 82, where it's a bit of a black year, but the story of Formula One would be very different if it hadn't happened. So
absolutely,
definitely. Right, we are now 1 hour 26 into this recording, so I think it's probably a good idea to say goodbye. Do you want to talk a little bit about your channel before we go?
Yeah, sure. So my channel is The Outside Line. I at the minute mainly do retro playthroughs of PlayStation 1 games. I've done F1 1995 with John Lacey. I'm currently doing F1 97 with Olivier Panis. I'm also doing Newman Haas Racing, so that's the 1998 kart IndyCar season. And there's a few more games I've finally got hold of the first Toka touring cars. I've owned the
Nice.
second one when I was younger. I've never owned the first one, so I'm going to go through that as well. So yeah, that's mainly what I do. But I also talk about a bit of modern F1 and some old F1 stories as well. So that's my channel. You know, I'm inconsistent, but I'll get the videos out eventually. So do check it out.
I think I was always James Thompson in the Honda when I used to play Toka back in about 1996.
See, I don't know as much about the drivers, so I am open to suggestions for who to kind of take on as a hero in Toka. So yeah, any
If I
advice you've got for
remember
me, I'd
correctly,
appreciate.
there's a bit of a performance bias in terms of like the Renaults always seem to be the quickest, but I could be wrong. I could be remembering it incorrectly.
Okay, so I'll stay away from them. Want a good underdog fight.
Just basically just take the cars out for a spin and have fun is basically what it's about, I think. But yeah,
They're so like the second one was brilliant. So
Yeah.
no doubt this will be much the same.
right. I don't really have a lot to say for myself. If other people have enjoyed this utter ramble, then great. So we had no idea sort of how it was going to work out. All we knew was that we, for one reason or another, our predictions had not been as successful as we might have liked. And talking it through definitely wasn't. But it's been fun. I've enjoyed chatting F1 as always. And it's got to that time of year again where time to go into the winter break and wish a Merry Christmas to everyone, I guess. So take care. Thank you for watching and bye bye for now.